It's Syracuse Sports coming back at you here. My name is Brent Axe. Amazing to have you a part of the show today, my friends. Don't miss out. Subscribe. Be like the cool kids. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever all the cool cats are hanging out, listening to the podcast, watching the podcast. Subscribe, follow, and you won't miss a darn thing. The weekend is here, which means college football, which means Syracuse at SMU, which means we're going to have a post-game show live after that game, Saturday night. Keep that in mind. But which Syracuse team is going to show up is the question. 2 weeks ago, Syracuse, Death Valley, best performance of the year. They smacked Clemson. I know Clemson's not exactly Clemson this year, but to go to Death Valley and win for the first time in the fashion that Syracuse did, 34-21 in a dominant performance, pretty darn impressive, even with the $25,000 fine that came for faking injuries. A week later, maybe Syracuse should have faked some injuries some more and paid the fine because Duke throttled the Orange at the Dome. The worst loss, albeit in a short Fran Brown era, but the worst loss of the Fran Brown era, a 35-point loss at home to Duke. So I think we have to distill this question down even further. Which Rickie Collins will show up in Dallas for the Orange to take on SMU? Now, it was week 1 for Collins. It was week 5 for everybody else. But as Fran Brown has said, that's why you pay 2, meaning that's why you pay 2 quarterbacks. Collins at one point was designated as QB1 until losing a competition with Steve Angeli in camp. Well, Angeli's no longer an option. So can Rickie Collins make a huge leap from week 1 to week 2 in terms of how he's playing and when he's playing? Because Syracuse needs him to. Duke came in rated 17th in the ACC in scoring defense, and Collins was only able to generate 3 points against that defense. So what will he do on the road this week against SMU, a team that's got its issues defensively, as our guest coming up is going to describe? But I wanted to listen to a couple things that Fran Brown said this week about Rickie Collins. Here's the first one.
Getting better. I thought Rickie did a pretty good job for his first time, getting a chance to play. I felt like all of us around him, starting with myself and the coaching staff and the players, we just had to play. We had to be on our A game to help him out his first time out. And I don't think we did that to compliment to help him.
Okay, so that's Fran Brown on Rickie Collins. And Jeff Nixon reiterated that. Some other people reiterated that. Well, it wasn't just Rickie. The whole team has to back him up. Yeah, but quarterback can be a lonely world when you're staring down receivers, trying to read defenses, and trying to get out there. As Rickie said this week himself, we should be scoring 40 points a game. It's a huge leap from 3 points to 40 in 1 week. But there was something impressive about Rickie Collins. He requested to watch film with Fran Brown on Saturday night shortly after Syracuse lost to Duke. Here's Fran Brown talking about that.
It just shows that he's a leader, that he's who we need at quarterback for us to continue to grow, for our program to continue to grow and be successful. I mean, I know for you guys, there's a lot that's going on, but we're still building the program, right? I think, how many games we played last year? 13 and 5 this year. So, like, I've only been here for 18 games, right? So it just takes time, but it's good to have a quarterback already wanting to do that. That's his first time playing, first time getting a chance to do it. Having other players that all wanted to come in yesterday and watch stuff ahead of time before we get to go through it with them on Monday and things of that nature. So, I mean, we're just building the program, and I think it's going in the right direction.
Now, I would mark the tape on that one, friends, because Fran Brown saying, hey, we're still building a program. We're still incorporating a quarterback here. That shies away from the high expectations of wanting to be in the ACC championship game and wanting to make the college football playoff. These are still things Syracuse wants to do. But I thought it was interesting that Fran backed off a little bit here, saying, no, we're here to develop players, and they want to be a part of Syracuse football for things other than football and dart, and all that's great. But we're getting away from the central message here. Fran Brown is paid to win football games. Rickie Collins is out there to generate offense. So can they do that in 1 week? That is the biggest question. So I wanted to look at it from an SMU perspective, and I wanted to talk to somebody that knows SMU as well as anybody. And we found that person in Billy Embody. Billy Embody from On the Pony Express. It's the On3 SMU site. He does a great podcast about SMU as well. Will this SMU defense present an opportunity for Rickie Collins to take that step forward? Because this is still an offense that has a good coordinator, a great quarterbacks coach, good receivers, a good running game, and an offensive line playing well enough right now. The Syracuse defense, as we said, until proven otherwise, you cannot rely on them to win games. This is on Rickie Collins. Can he do it against this SMU team? And everything you have to know and want to know about SMU, that is coming up shortly with Billy Embody. But just a reminder that we love to feature your original music here on Syracuse Sports. How do you get your music featured on Syracuse Sports? Oh, it's so easy, friends. All the info is in the show notes on how you can get in touch with me, and we'll have a little back and forth. We'll get permission to use your music, and it's really that easy. Reed Kirkwood is an artist that we featured before. Happy to feature Reed again on the pod here today. It's a great song called Let Me Leave You. If you want your music featured here on Syracuse Sports, get in touch and we'll make it happen. So let's listen to a little bit of Let Me Leave You from Reed Kirkwood here, and then we'll listen to the song in its entirety at the end of the podcast. So a little bit of Reed and then a little bit of Billy Embody talking Syracuse SMU.
There's an indent in my bed from when you left, and I bet you can't forget all those nights we never slept, 'cause we were fireworks till we crashed and burned, and now you're gone. You're not leaving me that easily, so let me leave you with something to remember me by. Like every memory that's burned into the back of your mind, 'cause you can't take it back, all the good and bad. No, you can't erase your past like a photograph. So let me leave you with something to remember me by, something to remember me by.
So, Billy, here we are talking about Syracuse and SMU, but we've got to throw Arkansas into the conversation as well. A lot of buzz down that way about Rhett Lashley, the Arkansas alum, and that job is open. And I know he addressed that. We're speaking here on Tuesday. I know he addressed it with the media. So all concerns put aside, or is there still going to be some buzz that Arkansas is going to make a run at this guy at some point?
Well, I think that's the thing with an alumni being, included in this type of a link or rumor or speculation, which Rhett Lashley kind of addressed. And, for Rhett, I really don't think it's a job, number one, that he's willing to take in its current state right now. That's not to say if they make a hire now in 5 years that Rhett Lashley doesn't give it a second look. But my opinion, having talked with Rhett Lashley, various sources, is that the SMU job might very well be better right now than that Arkansas job. I mean, you've got an AD there and Hunter Yurchek who's blatantly talking about how this is a job that doesn't have the resources to succeed right now. Sam Pittman certainly being a part of that. And, so I think that's something where people have to remember about this job at Arkansas is, yes, it's in the SEC. I think there's a path to winning there. I think it takes a very, very particular plan and everybody pulling together resources to make that happen. So I think short of Arkansas boosters like a Tyson, a Jerry Jones, or whoever saying, hey, we want our Arkansas son to come on home, make him the highest paid coach in the SEC type of a deal, give him the resources, we'll write the check. I just am not sure that this one gets done. And on top of that, Rhett Lashley really likes it here in Dallas. I think that's very important for people to know as well. This is a coach that has now come back to SMU. He's obviously the offensive coordinator at one point, comes back as the head coach, has had a lot of success, has navigated the portal well, has navigated NIL well, and he has the support from the boosters as well as the administration to keep doing this job at a very high level. And on top of that, Fayetteville is very nice. I've been there. It's a beautiful area up there in Arkansas, but Dallas really has latched his family in really well. His kids go to a great school. One of them's the starting quarterback, I believe. So there's just a lot of things right now away from the field right now that aren't even pointing him toward this job, I think, at least in the back of his mind.
Yeah, Billy, I think if you look at it objectively, I mean, the resources SMU has, the path to the college football playoff, we've already seen that with what SMU did last year. It just feels like the climb is so much higher at Arkansas. I totally get how the emotional strings could be tugged a little bit there, going back home and, being the conquering hero back. And there are some resources there. You mentioned Jerry Jones. Not like Arkansas can't pay Rhett Lashley well to take that job. But if you're just looking at it objectively right now, I think SMU is a better job, all things considered. But I wanted to expand on that a little bit because it feels like there is some resources there. There's some money behind this program in the modern era of NIL and everything we're dealing with here. What is that SMU job that he's currently in right now? It feels like there's every opportunity there to take this thing as high as it can go.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I think as you look at SMU and how they've risen back into a power conference now in the ACC, there is the blueprint of success, and it's last year, right? Like you get into the college football playoff, your quarterback throws 3 interceptions that put you down against a Penn State team. But for those people that really watch that game closely, and it's all ifs and buts, so it doesn't matter. But SMU physically did not look out of place there. They had a quarterback who made numerous mistakes, and if they get by that game, then you look at Boise State, you look on a neutral turf in a stadium, not in 0-degree weather up there at Penn State, and then you look at potentially playing Notre Dame, and who knows? So there's a path to a national championship now. I mean, it's there, and for Rhett Lashley, in this job, the resources are there, and I think when things like this happen with the Arkansas job, or let's say either this cycle or next, the Auburn job, those are 2 jobs that everybody's going to talk about Rhett Lashley with. And truthfully, if you look at after last year, Arkansas probably should have fired Sam Pittman. They probably could have gone after Rhett Lashley. And at that point, maybe you're looking at a different scenario coming off a college football playoff appearance for SMU. But now it's just in a situation where SMU has continued to move things in the direction that Rhett Lashley wants it to be. I think the stadium is going to be expanded here in the next couple of years, or at least shovels in the ground. Those are important things to realize, is that they have so many resources backing this thing. He's never been told no from a money perspective. This is a university that has gone out and grabbed Texas's sitting president, Maryland's sitting AD, Andy Enfield from USC. Of course, Arkansas fans know that situation well. Adia Barnes, even from Arizona. They are making big moves, and whether it be on campus or with athletics, they are continuing to make that the focal point. They do not want this athletic department and this university to be left out of whatever is coming down the pipeline in, let's just say, 2030. I mean, there is no price on getting into whatever the next best thing is for SMU. And their donors really focus on that. Everything that they do is driven around that. And when you're the coach of the football team and that's the mindset, you're not having your AD come out and talk about how the resources aren't there to win right now. All the things are there for SMU to win. And that's why it's such a really promising job for so many people.
So, Billy, that's SMU on the macro. As we zoom in on this 2-2 start for this team, they're coming off a bye week here. Just how would you encapsulate this 2-2 start for SMU this year?
All over the place, which is not been really where Rhett Lashley's team has been for the most part the prior 2 years. They were a group of 5 team that lost their 2 power conference games against Oklahoma and TCU, and then went on to win the AAC. They go into the ACC and they lose to BYU. You could tell that the quarterback situation was really at the crux of that. And so they make a change and they take off with Kevin Jennings. And everybody knows kind of the history after that. And they were, poor kick covered away from, at least going to overtime with Clemson in that ACC championship game. But now you fast forward and you lose so many pieces off of that defense. They've also been hit with the injury bug, which is something SMU's really kind of been able to avoid the last couple of seasons, is major injuries from a top to bottom level. They've been missing a couple of pass rushers that have been either nicked up or out completely. They've missed both starting linebackers. They've pretty much not had both starting linebackers for the majority of the season together on the field. And so that is something that I think is one of my biggest things to watch with this game against Syracuse is, do they get those 2 guys back? Alexander Kilgore and Zakai Barker. The secondary has been all sorts of change following a season where you had so many reliable veterans back there. Now there's a changing of the guard and leadership. and it just hasn't gone the way it needed to. And then offensively, it's been, you lose a guy like Brashard Smith, and you're trying to find out who that next thing is at running back. And so there's been that kind of a moment. Now they've found it with TJ Harden. And overall, you get Jordan Hudson back, who's a really talented wide receiver. There is just a really a sense of this team needed the bye week. They've had 4 weeks of all over the place play. They've been leading in the fourth quarter against both of their Power 4 opponents in Baylor and TCU. And you could see there were flashes of, okay, this team can do something. They can make some moves here, but they just haven't learned how to finish in those big games. So this will be a test for SMU. I could see this being an emotional type of a game for SMU overall, because they've just not been able to finish. So if they get this across the finish line, they beat Syracuse, regardless of the situation with Syracuse's quarterback, that is something that they can finally hang their hat on and say, guys, we got this. Let's get back to playing SMU football, playing complementary football, because that's something they really haven't done for the large part of this season.
Yeah, let's roll off that, Billy. How would you describe what this defense is with Rickie Collins coming in? He's a backup quarterback. It was a competition between Rickie and Steve Angeli in camp. Angeli wins out and is still, as we speak, the 10th leading passer in the country. But that injury took him out for the season. And now you have Rickie Collins, who's, he's trying to fly the plane here, trying to get on the plane while it's still in the air and just jump in there and run this offense here. So a defense, as you noted there, that had some injuries and is trying to get its feet on the ground here. Now you got a quarterback trying to find his way, going on the road here for the first time. How do you think that combination could do for this SMU defense?
Yeah, I think this is kind of that game where SMU has an opportunity to really get on track. I've known Rickie Collins for a few years now. I covered him when he was being recruited at LSU. I watched him as a high school prospect. I followed his career closely at LSU. When he transferred, I thought good for him. He's getting out of a situation where he's not going to play. I felt like LSU would eventually recruit over him to begin with, but now he gets to Syracuse. He probably thought he was going to get his shot to be the guy this year, but like you said, Steve Angeli wins out, and I'm not surprised about that. For me, watching Rickie play, I think this is an opportunity for SMU to really build its confidence. I think Rickie's a great kid. I just don't see it as far as him being able to, produce at a really high level. But at the same time, SMU's defense has been wildly inconsistent, and Syracuse has some great pass catchers and things like that can make things happen for them. So it is a game where SMU's got to be locked in on their, attention to detail, figuring out, where the ball is going to go, playing smart fundamental football as far as tackling goes. Missed tackles have been an issue. I think this team is in the world of trying too hard right now defensively. So they needed the bye week to kind of maybe calm down. Like Isaiah Wacobia, their preseason All-American safety, has missed a bunch of tackles. He's looked lost at times. If he settles down and plays the way he can and does his job rather than worrying about how all these new faces and these new situations are going to go with SMU, that would go a long way to putting them in the right position to have success on Saturday.
The interesting thing is you mentioned you had covered Collins from down that way. Syracuse has a couple guys from Texas that are producing. Jonte Cook, who, went around a little bit in terms of he was at Texas, then he was briefly at Washington and has settled in as a key target in the Syracuse offense. Big Byron Washington, who just continues to get more playing time. Fran Brown described him as a leader on the team, even as a freshman. And Luke Carney, who piled up a ton of yards, won some state championships in that area as well. He's now the backup quarterback. And as we've seen with Rickie Collins, knock on wood, you don't want to continue to see the injury train going here, but you're one play away. And to see particularly Carney and Washington as freshmen in the position that they're in and contributing here, just goes to show you that if you can recruit well, and SMU has recruited well, Syracuse has shot up the charts a little bit with Fran Brown, that you're going to get on the field, or at least have an opportunity to get on the field. And Texas is producing some fruit here for Syracuse, even just a short list of players, but I'm sure they're looking for more.
Yeah, it's a great place to recruit. I think that's another piece, not to jog it all the way back to the Lashley and Arkansas thing, but man, when you're in Dallas, not only do you see that fruit of, hey, recruiting the DFW guys from high school and trying to build those top classes, and it's maybe easier now to get them to stay home with NIL and a Power 4 conference, whereas SMU just kind of had to get lucky on some of those top flight guys to stay home prior to the ACC, but then you can get them on the bounce back too. So that's really important as well. Man, Jonte Cook was one where, SMU fans that follow recruiting or follow high school, when he entered the portal and like you said, kind of bounced around and all those things, most everyone's like, man, bring him home, bring him home.
Yeah.
He's obviously had his issues, but it's great to see him settling in. I covered a lot of Jonte Cook, saw him a lot at DeSoto. Former SMU assistant Claude Mathis is the coach there. And of course, they're a powerhouse. You got to go see DeSoto. But for Jonte to be breaking out is a big deal. Byron Washington, what a story he is. Yeah. He's big as a house, and has really been cool to see him get to that level and have success, because it's hard to do when you're a bigger lineman. It really is. And he's really adjusted well to that next level. So yeah, SMU, there's going to be a little bit of familiarity with some of these guys, and Fran Brown knows how to bring in talent across the country too.
The interesting thing is, Billy, Byron's lost about 50 pounds. I mean, he still walks in the room and he's going to be the biggest guy in there, but it's interesting to see how he's really honed in on his health and trying to get a little faster. And he's been an interesting guy to talk to for sure. And that Syracuse offensive line obviously has to protect Rickie Collins at all costs here going forward. On the SMU side of things, Billy, I wanted to ask you about Kevin Jennings, and you mentioned this team needed the bye week. Is that a guy who needed the bye week? I know he's battled a little injury this year, and where would you put him now that he's fully in control of that SMU offense?
Yeah, I think he's at 100% now. I mean, he got that ankle kind of beat up against Baylor, and then saw it re-aggravated against TCU where he got thrown down. I got to give credit to SMU's offensive line. They've really protected him well for the most part. Like, they haven't exposed him to too many bad situations. That one play against TCU was kind of that one where he kind of got whipped down and he nicked up his ankle there. But, having the bye week, they took some reps off of his plate to make sure he could recover a little bit more and get back, because they need him to be at their very best. Because when he is one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in this league. I mean, he really is just special from an arm talent and playmaking perspective. Fran Brown is such a smart coach as far as, coaching up secondary and doing all of those things. So he's going to have, I think, a couple things up his sleeve for Kevin Jennings. Kevin's going to have to be ready for those. This is not going to be an easy task to, diagnose this defense and try to make plays around it for Kevin. But it's cliche, but SMU really tries to hone in on guys doing their job. And Kevin has done that for the most part this year. I think he's coming off of one of his better games for SMU. People are going to look at the 2 interceptions at the end there. I mean, not indicative of the game he played. You get down on 3rd and 16 on the first one, and you're trying to make a play. You're probably punting because it's that far away, so you throw it up, it gets intercepted. The second one was 30 seconds left and they're down 11. You're trying to force something over the middle to make a play. So there's some of that with his interceptions. Ben, look, he is at this point though good for an interception or a turnover a game, and that's the reality of it too. It's hard to find. You can't ignore that, but also at the same time, he makes so many plays. So it's really kind of special to watch him continue to develop, but he needs a game where he really plays clean overall. He needs to break through with that. There's a chance, especially if SMU plays at a high level defensively, where he should have the confidence and be a little bit more careful with the ball. He doesn't feel like he has to win the game every play, with the way the defense could, in theory, match up against the Syracuse offense with Rickie Collins. If he kind of reads into that well, he could kind of settle down from the turnover perspective, but he's still dynamic and he's still one of the top quarterbacks in this league.
Every week's different, Billy. And look, Syracuse played its best game of the year against Clemson and its worst game of the year against Duke. So whatever falls in the middle here is going to be interesting, but they are going to have to make some changes on defense. And how does this compute to you when I say this to you? Because it's a Syracuse defense that blitzes a lot, yet they only have 6 sacks. This is a Syracuse defense that both Darian Mensah, the Duke quarterback last week, and even Fran Brown in his press conference said, we were showing exactly what we're doing. It didn't really take a lot. You didn't have to hire Sherlock Holmes to figure out what that Syracuse defense was doing. So now, surely they're going to try and change some things this week. I don't know what they can change. As we mentioned, their defensive line hasn't been the best, and this is a defense that's trying to find itself. And here you have an offense coming off a bye week, and you mentioned some of the strengths and weaknesses of what Jennings can do there. So I'm intrigued as anybody to see how this plays out here, because you mentioned it. Fran Brown's not going to come in to this game with this the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, exactly. It shows the volatility of college football, and I mean SMU's experienced that in their own games as well. You know, against Baylor and TCU, your high is the high. You're up 14 against Baylor, and then you look up and you're beat. And against TCU, you battle back, you start slow, you get back in there, you take a lead, and then boom, just like that, a minute 15 of game time later, you're back down and you never recover. And so I think for both of these teams, they've kind of seen some of that volatility. It's a matter of, I think, who's going to run the ball really well. Because I think if you're Q's, you've got to, it's kind of, Rhett Lashley talked about this today, when you have somebody who's making a change at quarterback, but then also that change from week 1 to week 2 of that starter.
Yeah.
What does that look like? Because, you know, for SMU, they have a ground game when they execute and when they stick with it. And against TCU, I felt like at times they got away from it, instead of, you know, sticking with it, because they were able to rip some runs, or they were able to just get their running backs involved as like an extension of the run game. A swing pass or a quick check down over the middle turns into a big gain. And so I think if SMU can kind of build their offense a little bit around getting the running backs involved and building that confidence, it really helps this offense cook a little bit. So this Rhett Lashley tenure is really kind of boiled down to this. You know, do they hit that like 32 carry mark on the rushing side of things? And if they do, they've lost probably a handful of games overall, and probably a couple since if you take out the first year when they're you know, coming in and completely, you know, doing their own thing with the program. Ever since that 2023 season, when they get that clip of about 32 or more carries offensively, they're usually in really good shape to win the football game. And of course, for SMU, they've lost a couple games when leading or when scoring 30 points or more. So also an important marker for those people kind of keeping an eye on those things for SMU.
Billy, last thing for me on a little bit of a different note. This is a great road trip year for Syracuse. They started with Tennessee and Atlanta. They got South Bend on the slate, Miami, Clemson for those that went to Death Valley. You're going to have a lot of Syracuse fans making the trip to Dallas for the first time. You're going to Dallas in and of itself is certainly, you have a lot of choices, a lot of options to spend a day or two and enjoy the greater Dallas area. But what is like something like an SMU game day thing that Syracuse fans should check out and experience if they're going for the first time?
Well, you've got to check out the Boulevard. Most everyone will welcome you with open arms. The Boulevard is the main kind of drag down SMU's campus. And, you know, a lot of people have been setting up tents for years and have their whole game day setups, and everyone, again, pretty welcoming there. So just kind of stroll down the Boulevard, and if you see somebody, you kind of make eye contact, maybe say, hey, you know, first time here, love the campus. And you're probably looking at getting yourself a nice beverage out of it and maybe some food. So everybody on campus is pretty welcoming, and there's a bunch of cool spots to hit around Dallas. It's just a matter of, you know, what you're looking for. If you're looking for a Friday night, you know, steak before the game, I mean, there's tons of great steakhouses. If you're looking for a patio in Texas, you know, kind of country feel, there's, you know, you can go out to Katy Trail Ice House or Billy Bob's or something. But Dallas has a little bit of everything, but should be in good shape with a 2:30 kickoff on Saturday to have quite the morning on the Boulevard. I would definitely encourage people to get over there a couple hours before kick and just stroll through that.
Yeah, especially, we know you guys don't mess around with barbecue down there. So
No.
if you're walking down the Boulevard and you smell something good, yeah, go over and say hello and maybe grab some great Texas barbecue out of it at the very least. Well, Billy, thank you for your time and your perspective here. This is intriguing to see Syracuse make the trip to Dallas, and, you know, the new ACC and all the teams and the different experiences that you can get. And we'll see how this one turns out, but really appreciate you coming on the pod with us here today.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Our thanks again to Billy Embody on 3 on the Pony Express for joining us. Great insight there on SMU. So can the Orange recover from their worst loss of the season and find some middle ground, right? Best win of the year, worst loss, not only of the year, but of the Fran Brown era. What lies in the middle for Syracuse to get back on track and get a win at SMU this weekend? My thanks to Billy for joining us. If you missed our podcast earlier this week, Mike Waters and I had a conversation about the great Lawrence Moten, who we unfortunately lost this week at the age of 53. We reflected on Lawrence, his life, his career, and just a great, great man. And of course, one of the greatest players in Syracuse basketball history. So I hope you could check out that podcast, and I hope you could check out our Syracuse football post-game show Saturday night after the Orange take on SMU. I'll be live with you on our YouTube channel, on X, on Facebook as well. So follow along live if you can't do that. Of course, if you subscribe to the pod on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, you can listen when you want over the weekend after the Orange take on SMU. 3:30 kickoff on Saturday for that one. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Thanks to our Syracuse Sports Insiders, as always, for your great insight, the ability to directly connect with me via text message. It's just $3.99 a month to get the latest news, information, analysis from me, your thoughts, your opinions, your questions, what you want us to ask players and coaches, what you want me to talk about on the pod. It's all available to our Syracuse Sports Insiders, who also get exclusive voice heard on this podcast and our Syracuse football postgame shows as well. So thanks to our Syracuse Sports Insiders. Thanks to Billy for joining us, and thanks to you for being a part of the pod here. All right, let's let him take us out once again as we feature your original music on Syracuse Sports. This is Reed Kirkwood. It's a song called Let Me Leave You. You can get all the info on how you can download Reed's music in the show notes. Also in the show notes, how you can get your music featured here on Syracuse Sports. So Reed, take us out here and take us into the weekend, baby.
There's an indent in my bed from when you left, and I bet you can't forget all those nights we never slept, 'cause we were fireworks till we crashed and burned, and now you're gone. You're not leaving me that easily, so let me leave you with something to remember me by. Like every memory that's burned into the back of your mind, 'cause you can't take it back, all the good and bad. No, you can't erase your past like a photograph. So let me leave you with something to remember me by, something to remember me by. There's a red dress you wore out the night we met, and when you see our friends again, you know they'll ask you how I've been. So you take the drive home, but you're all alone. Turn the radio on and it's my favorite song. You change the dial, but I'm right there with every mile. So let me leave you with something to remember me by. Like every memory that's burned into the back of your mind, 'cause you can't take it back, all the good and bad. No, you can't erase your past like a photograph. So let me leave you with something to remember me by, something to remember me by. The touch of my skin, the taste of my kiss, every little thing about me that you're gonna miss. I could have never known that you were gonna throw it all away. So let me leave you with something to remember me by, 'cause though we're over, no, you won't be over me overnight. So let me leave you with something to remember me by. Like every memory that's burned into the back of your mind, 'cause you can't take it back, all the good and bad. No, you can't erase your past like a photograph. So let me leave you with something to remember me by, with something to remember me by. There's an indent in my bed from when you left, and I bet you can't forget